Hi, it's Sean, and you're listening to The 3-Month Vacation. What's the price of a hot cross bun in Auckland? It could be $5, $6.50, or even $7. It may seem slightly ridiculous that seemingly the same product has different prices. This Easter delicacy isn't free. No one is standing on street corners giving them away. As clients, we know that we have to shell out some amount to have all that sugar, flour, and butter. However, when it comes to selling information, the waters get a little murky. How are we supposed to know whether we should sell a product or give it away absolutely free? And the answer is, it depends. With that vague answer in mind, let's leap into 3 considerations that you need to have in place before you get paid for anything, whether it's hot cross buns or an information product. These 3 elements, when nicely stacked, look like this. Number 1, a well-defined result. 2, how the information is positioned. And 3 is the urgency of the problem. I know, these 3 points sound like something you've read or heard before. Yet stay with me because we'll go deeper into these concepts in this very podcast. And to begin with, let's start with the end in mind. A well-defined result. For most of my life, I've taken photos. Almost all of them were below average. I've loved photography since I was a teenager. I borrowed, owned, and used quite a few cameras, and I always aspired to take pictures as well as those that I saw in National Geographic. For most of my life, that dream stayed elusive. And then one day, I was in a tiny village in Vietnam, and I saw a sign. Not that kind of sign. It was just a signboard, which announced that a professional photographer was taking groups out for a photo shoot. When I showed up the next day, I was the only one. When the photographer told me his plan, I was less than enthusiastic. He said we were going to a beach to shoot pictures of fishermen. Growing up in India, I had seen many beaches and hundreds of fishermen. However, I had never strayed in the water with my camera. Why would I do such a thing? Why would I take a $3,000 camera and risk it from being destroyed by the salt and the waves? The instructor was having none of my nonsense. He wouldn't let me stand on the shore. He insisted that I get in the water. As the fisher folk came in, I found myself bobbing in almost waist-deep water, taking close-up pictures. For the first time, I realized that photography wasn't something I had to do from a distance. It wasn't something where I tried to blend in and do a hit and run. The pictures I took on the trip weren't great, but when I posted them in an online photography group, people oohed and they ahed. But wait, was that the result that the photographer promised? Not at all. One reason I was the only one on that shoot was that there was no demand for the photographer's services. He didn't promise any outcome, did he? All he said was that he was taking groups out for a photo shoot. Instead, what he was really doing was taking people out of their comfort zone so that they could learn to take outstanding pictures. Which photography course would you sign up for? One that was specific or just a generic, let's see? Do you want something that's tangible and measurable or something vague and unclear? At Psychotactics, we stumbled upon this concept of specific results back in 2010. I was conducting the headlines course, and a client was insistent on the end goal. To fend him off a bit, I said, well, you learn to write 8 different types of headlines, and each headline will be extremely compelling. Your audience will open your emails immediately. But how did we sell the headline course before that point in time? Well, we did what the photographer did. We said, hey, it's the headline course. Yes, end of story. Fortunately, most people trusted us and signed up, but we blundered our way into understanding the value of that payoff. So what did we do next? We started to look at every course that we had, every course we did, every product we sold, and we asked ourselves, what happens when the client gets to the end of this product? What happens when the client gets to the end of this book? What happens when the client finishes listening to the podcast? Why is this knowledge of what happens so very important? Well, it's not as important as you'd believe. People buy into workshops, books, and training even when there's no clear outcome. However, when there is a clear destination, they can benchmark if your promise is true or not. When you make good on your promise, guess what happens to the client? That's right. They want more of whatever it is you're selling. Let's take the cartooning course, for example. We make a solemn promise to everyone who joins the course. The promise goes like this. When you get to the 10-week mark, you will not only be able to draw, but you will also have your own character. Think of how specific this promise is. The client is 99% sure, probably 99.9% sure that they can't draw at all. They've tried to draw something or the other for the past 20 or 30 years, and it always looks like the work of a 6-year-old. Then there's a cartooning course that is not only saying, oh, you will learn to draw cartoons, you'll be better at drawing, etc. They're not making a generic pitch. Instead, it's giving you a target to aim for. So what happens next? It's just like the movies. By week 8, they already have a character in place. We said week 10, but they get there earlier than before. Then we finish the course at week 12, at least phase 1 of the course, and we say, would anyone like to continue? Do they continue? Yes. Almost immediately, most of the hands go up. And it doesn't stop there either. We announce another course, launch another book, hold a workshop, and the client knows one thing. There will be a promise, and you will keep that promise. Even if the client doesn't have much free time, they will sign up because they understand what really matters to them. So what's the moral of the story so far? Well, it's not 1 or 2, but 3. The first point is, when a client is considering your product or service, they have a choice between specific stuff and generic. Guess which one they will pick. 2, when they sign up and they reach their goal, will they sign up for a follow-through? And 3, if you have any other offerings for the client, are they less or more likely to sign up? It's hard work getting clients, but even harder keeping them. If you want clients to come back, you need to have a definite win for them from the very start. Why would you do otherwise? Do you want to spend all your time looking for new clients, or would you have clients that keep coming back? Okay, so it's clear what works, but how are we supposed to know the result in advance? Here's how to approach it step by step. Start with the end in mind. Ask yourself, when someone completes this course, what will they be able to do that they couldn't do before? Secondly, make it specific. What's the transformation? What's the before? What's the after? 3, work backwards from a problem that your client already has in the first place. Let's take some examples that incorporate all of these 3. Example 1, when you finish this photography course, you will be able to take dozens of photos of strangers, and they will give you permission to do so. Example 2, by week 10, you will have drawn a character you can use in a comic strip. Example 3, by the end of this book, you'll be able to repair your own credit safely and without the shady practices that many companies use. So the end is clear. It's a specific promise, and there is a transformation. So you're looking for that transformation. That's how we end the first part of this podcast. But let's move on, shall we? Because in the second part, we look at how the information has to be positioned. You know about positioning. You've heard about it before. Well, let's hear it for the second time, and probably in a different way. There's a story of a store owner. He managed several stores over the years and wanted to write a book. This book would help other store owners avoid theft. According to current statistics on ebroker.com, the situation is serious. 75% of employees have stolen at least once from their employer. An estimated 60% of inventory losses are due solely to employee theft. Retail businesses lost over $112 billion in inventory, with 29% attributed to employee theft. There are more details, of course, but the scale of employee theft is staggering. The store owner had enough experience to help others reduce these losses considerably. His challenge was that he couldn't turn his knowledge into a long book. Everything he knew could fit on the back of a postcard. What would you pay for information that was so sparse? In a way, that's the wrong question. The real question is, how do you position your product so that it's seen as valuable? How do you get clients to pay you what you believe it's worth? In this case, potential clients were given two options to spot and to stop employee theft. Option 1, a comprehensive book with a few hundred pages. Option 2, the exact factors to look for to achieve the same result, but on the back of a postcard. Which one would you choose? Exactly. The postcard reinforces the first point. People prefer the shortest path to a result. Most of us don't want a 200-page explanation when a single page will do. When the problem is urgent or costly, the desire for speed only increases. However, let's look at this same idea through the lens of paid versus free, which is where we started this podcast. When you position something, there is one subtle but critical shift. You stop presenting it as a collection of points. The moment you say, here are 5 points to do this or do that, you begin to reduce its perceived value. People don't pay for points. People pay for systems. When people pay, they're not paying for more information. They're paying for certainty. They're paying for compression. They're paying for the feeling that this is the path. Follow it and you get the result. A system does more than create a list. It shows you the sequence. It removes guesswork. It highlights what to avoid along the way. And that's what makes it valuable. In a way, the postcard concept is almost a distraction. It's not the size of the content that creates value. It's not even the format. It's whether the information is presented as a system. It's clear, it's direct, it has a path to a result. A result matters, but a precise pathway matters even more. That was quite a lot to digest, wasn't it? We worked on result, that's where we started, and then we talked about the system. You have your positioning, but you have a system, and that's what people buy. But not a lot happens until you build in the third factor, which is urgency. Clients may want your product, but you know how they hesitate, don't you? You think that their hesitation comes from not being ready or because they don't have a budget. These are good excuses, but we know how quickly we operate when things are urgent. In most cases, your product will not be worth too much until and unless the client feels urgency. At this point in time, we're getting into complex territory. We not only have to create urgency, but we have to make sure our product isn't seen as free or not so valuable. So how do we go about that urgency factor? Let's find out in the next section. Except that the next section is going to be part 2 of this podcast. Why? Because as I was recording it, it seemed to go well past the 20-minute mark. And we'll release both of the podcasts together so you can listen to them back to back. And also gives you some kind of relief from listening to me continuously for hours on end. Anyway, this brings us to the end of this part of the podcast. It had 3 parts, but the first part that we covered was the result. It's like building the Taj Mahal. If you just go around saying, I'm going to build a monument, well, that's not going to work. But when you have that map in place and you say, this is what the Taj Mahal looks like, well, you're going to get more buyers, aren't you? People are going to buy into your idea. So the result is very crucial, whether you're baking a hot cross bun or you're selling an information product. This podcast was about information products, but it really applies to pretty much any product or service that you are offering. The second point was about positioning. It was how you take a product that's an 18-page book and you change the way that the client looks at it. They stop counting the number of pages and they start realizing that they're getting to the result very quickly. Unless you position things, people don't understand that there is a system behind it, which is why you have to call it a system and create a system, no matter how small or how big. Usually, smaller is better, but if you have to expand, go for it. Just be sure that people buy into a system. And that's what you have to position in their mind. That what you're selling are not a bunch of points, not just a product, but it's a system. So what's the one thing that you can do today? Look at the product that you're selling and ask yourself, what is the result? What's the before and after? What's the transformation journey? Why should they bother dealing with your product, your book, your course, whatever it is you're selling? There has to be a transformation, and when they reach the other side, they should know what the other side looks like. That's the result. Okay, that brings us to the end of this podcast. Let's find out what's happening in Psychotactics Land. To begin with, we have the storytelling course. What's the transformation? If you've struggled with stories and you don't know why your stories are so boring, you can't consistently come up with stories, well, the storytelling course will show you all of those things. You might have a list of 20 things, 20 problems that you have with stories, but here's the main factor. Most people look for stories. They research endlessly, spend days, weeks trying to find the exact stories. And we don't. On the storytelling course, you learn how to take the very next good story that you find. And in a day, you can find 1 or 2 stories almost all the time. And it gets more bizarre. You can get 12 stories that you can file away for future use. This concept of how to use a single point to build a story upon is completely different from all of the storytelling that you've read before or seen before. So, psychotactics.com/workshops/storytelling. The page opens on April 11th. You have to be on the waiting list to get in there, but you can also get goodies by just signing up to the waiting list. And yes, the course starts in June, and that's the result. You'll start to tell stories based on a single line. And you'll create stories that people will go, oh, wow, you're amazing. You're so talented. And you nod and say thank you because you know the secret of how to tell great stories. That brings us to the end of this podcast. If you haven't already read Suddenly Talented, then do so because it will help you with everything, including storytelling. There are lots of stories, and maybe you can deconstruct some of those stories in Suddenly Talented. So go to psychotactics.com/suddenlytalented. And yeah, that's it from me. I'll say bye for now, and we'll see you in 5000 BC. Bye-bye.